What's going on, my beautiful viewers, and I am back again today for a continuation of my Overlord Season 1 episode breakdown. So I said in the last video that if we got that one to 500 likes, I would continue with the series, and I remember it because I posted that video late at night. I went to bed, I woke up, and we had already hit 500 likes on that video. So thank you all so much for the support on that video. It's clear that these videos are wanted, so I decided I'm going to continue with it, and hopefully we can keep that pace up. I do apologize for taking a little while to get this one out. You can blame Final Fantasy XVI's release. I've been basically no-lifing that game recently, and I feel like my brain is bleeding because I stopped playing it in order to record this video, but I really wanted to get this video done for you guys. So in this video, we are going to be covering the content from episode 2 of the first season of Overlord. This episode covers the wrap-up of the first half of Volume 1, as well as the intermission and the first couple parts of the second half of Volume 1. So as I said in the last video, episode 1 basically stops like almost mid-paragraph in the light novel, so it was kind of a weird transition for me to pick up where I left off. But overall, based on what I've seen in Overlord so far, I would say this is one of the best adapted episodes, period, in terms of content from the light novel. There really isn't much that was cut out, save some minor details. So starting off, we have the introduction of the Guardians. So a detail that's brought up in the anime but is explained a little better in the light novel is that, all these NPCs in Nazarick, they all have like backstories that were written by their creators. In Yggdrasil, writing the backstory and the lore of a character really didn't do anything to it. However, because they're now alive, their backstories and their lore have basically become the basis for their personalities moving forward. So Shalltear, who was created by Peroncino, and apparently Peroncino's saying was, "Porn games are my life," according to Momonga in the light novel. He apparently had just like copy-pasted a bunch of X-rated, personality traits from like characters in H games to Shalltear, and that's why she's the way she is now. But basically in the light novel, they give you a little more detailed explanation to kind of explain why the Guardians are the way they are, and they're behaving the way they are is because they're just behaving according to their lore settings that the Einzelgone members had detailed out. So the rest of the Guardians file in, and this is actually where we get some new information from the light novel for the first time. So when Demiurge and Albedo arrive, there's actually a little point here I wanted to bring up that I thought was neat in the light novel. It's that when Demiurge talks to Ainz in this scene, his voice of control, I guess I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's called command mantra, but the skill that lets him control people with his voice, it's actually active during this scene. However, it only works on people level 40 and below. So obviously it doesn't have any effect on anyone there. Apparently, according to Ainz, it comes across as just like a particularly like luscious sounding voice, a very rich sounding voice. He basically has an ASMR type voice. I just thought that was a neat little detail because we don't get to see the command mantra actually like work on people until season 2. So but in the light novel, it's introduced already this early, having the command mantra, which is something that was excluded from the anime. So basically we have the whole scene where they all bow to Ainz and they all, give their oaths and everything like that. So in the light novel, we actually get, Momonga's inner thoughts. And what happened was he was so overwhelmed by like all the seriousness of their oaths and them bowing and pledging allegiance to him and whatever, that he just decided to activate some passives just like on the spot. And one of them is his despair aura, and that's what's illustrated in the anime. I've explained this before, but despair aura, which is one of Ainz's passive skills, has 5 different levels to it. And he activates the first one here, which inflicts fear status on those around him. Now, normally, this would not have an effect on any of the NPCs. They are too high level and their resistances would counter it. However, because Ainz is holding the Staff of Ainz-Ulgone, the effect is multiplied, and so it's a lot stronger, and that's what kind of forces all of the NPCs to feel it. Because later on, after Ainz leaves, you get to mention like, oh, his aura was so, heavy, and like I thought I would collapse. And the reason for that is because he's holding the Staff of Ainz-Ulgone. Normally, that skill would have no effect on them, but I thought that was a little interesting detail that they excluded from the anime that would make more sense as to why they were, feeling this way, and also like that visual effect around Ainz that was never really explained in the anime. So then we have the conversation between the Guardians after Ainz leaves, and this is actually the intermission of Volume 1 of the light novel. And during this scene, the things I want to talk about are a couple of little details with Demiurge that are brought up in the light novel that are not included in the anime. So Shalltear and Albedo get into it with themselves, and then Demiurge, Cocytus, and Mare kind of, walk away. And this is where Demiurge brings up the topic of of Ainz having a kid, Ainz's heir, whatever you want to call it. So in the anime, this conversation between Demiurge and Mare is pretty short. There's a few more details in the light novel though. Demiurge proposes like, hey, let's, you know, have Ainz have a kid and we could have like an heir or whatever. And then he also says he's interested in how children could be used as like, you know, furthering the plans of Nazarick, and he asks Mare if he'd be interested in having any kids of his own.
Nani?
And then Mare asks him, you know, how do you make babies and everything like that. Interesting little inner dialogue with Demiurge where he has to suppress the urge to spoil Mare's purity. That's how it's worded in the light novel. But he like pushes it down, and that was just like a demonic urge that he had. But that kind of goes to show you like how Demiurge's mind works. Like even with other, you know, people, it doesn't matter. He still, because of the way he was programmed, he still gets those evil urges. They just happen for him. And the reason for that is because of his creator, who was Olbert. And Olbert, I've said this multiple times, he was like the guy who wanted to roleplay as like the evil guy. He was basically the opposite of Touch Me, who was, you know, the hero of justice kind of role player. He was complete opposite of him, and that's why they didn't really get along all that well, apparently, during the time of Ainz Ooal Gown. But that was just a little interesting tidbit that caught my eye when I was rereading the volume, is like basically that goes to show you like this is Demiurge's thought process, and this kind of explains why Demiurge is just always jumping to like a super evil solution to something, is because he just has these evil urges, and the only people that he suppresses those urges around are other creations of Nazarick. So then we move on to the scene with Momonga kind of testing out his abilities. This is a pretty faithful adaptation because we get a lot of inner dialogue in the anime as well for this scene. Basically, the only thing I wanted to enlighten on in this scene is how confused Ainz is as to how things are working in the new world at this point, because you know, he can't grip the sword. The sword just drops out of his hand, even though he was level 100 in Yggdrasil, and even though he was a magic caster, he had enough physical strength that he could easily, like, you know, take a mace and bludgeon, you know, small monsters to death in Yggdrasil, even though he wasn't a melee attacker. But he's not even able to equip the sword. He like takes a sword and he tries to move into a fighting stance, and it just falls out of his hands. And so that's functioning like the game. What is confusing Ainz so much is that this clearly isn't the game, because it is missing too many things, and you're allowed to do too many things, and it's too realistic. But a lot of the world's laws are functioning like the game, so this is very confusing to Ainz. Another thing that's confusing Ainz is his emotional suppression, and also there is a little funny dialogue in the light novel with him, you know, realizing that he didn't act on his sexual desire for Albedo. He said, I think in the light novel it says like something within Momonga like shifted, and I have it taken away from me before I can even use it or something like that. So showing that Suzuki Satoru never got a chance. And another thing that's confusing him is he doesn't know why the suppression is happening, because he thinks it's because he's an undead, but then Shaltir is also an undead, and she's prone to like extreme, you know, emotions, so he doesn't really understand what's happening. This is kind of laying the groundwork for, you know, the emotional suppression system that's present in the new world for Ainz. So he then goes out of the tomb in order to explore, and he runs into Demiurge, and something that isn't explained in the anime are those demons that he runs into before he runs into Demiurge. Those are subordinates of Demiurge from the 7th level. So these demons are actually called Wrath, Envy, and Greed. I think they're what they're called. So 7 deadly sins theme. In between level 80 and 90. So they're pretty strong NPCs. And another little detail in the light novel, I'm not sure how relevant this is, but Momonga makes them call him Dark Warrior during this scene, and that is basically like kind of laying the groundwork for the whole Momon thing. Momonga's like, oh, there's a reason I'm calling myself this, there's a reason I'm dressed this way, and Demiurge is like, oh, I see, of course. And you know, in the light novel we get more like, I don't know what you're thinking about, you know, I'm just a normal guy, it could be anything that Demiurge came up with. So this is already the first of Demiurge jumping to the conclusions, which is just a staple of Overlord at this point. So then we have that scene with them leaving the tomb, going up in the air, and something that isn't explained in the anime is the form that Demiurge takes. The form he actually takes in this scene is known as his half-demon form. Momonga says that Sebas and Albedo also have multiple forms. Apparently that kind of design was hard to make, but was consistently popular in Yggdrasil. But that's just a little note for that frog form. He shifts in the anime, and you're just like, what? And it's not explained, but there is an explanation for that in the light novel. So then we have the scene with them flying up and seeing the world, and I guess the only only thing in this scene that I would say is that you get a little more of kind of Ainz' shock at how beautiful the world is. Something that isn't explained in the anime is how you're not able to see nature like this in the Earth that Suzuki Satoru is from. They don't really go into detail during this part, but from what I know of the Earth in Overlord is that, the Earth has basically been polluted beyond measure. You can't even go outside without a gas mask on, and like people that like don't have masks, they'll like die or eventually, like because of the poisonous smog that's all around. And so like there just isn't nature like that available anymore. And so being able to see such clear skies is like so astounding to Momonga, who doesn't get to see stuff like that in real life. And then we also get a little bit about another Ainz guild member, Blue Planet, who is one of the people that designed the sky of the 6th floor. And basically Blue Planet has started playing Yggdrasil in order to see sights in nature and stuff that he couldn't see in the real world anymore, because Blue Planet loved nature and there was very little to no nature anymore in the real world because of pollution. So that just gives you a little idea of the planet that Suzuki Satoru comes from. And then we have the scene that pretty much defines where the story goes from here, with Momonga saying, "Oh, let's take over the world." Momonga says that and he's like just joking to himself, because that's something that like Albert and Lucifer and other guild members had said. It would be fun to like take over one of the worlds of Yggdrasil. Momonga's looking out and Demiurge is behind them, and apparently like Demiurge had this look on his face, and apparently if Momonga had seen the look on Demiurge's face, he would have explained a little bit more what he said, but he said it as a joke and he meant to be taken as a joke. But clearly, of course, Demiurge took that idea and rolled with it for the future seasons of Overlord, and that offhand comment basically drove the plot. I just find that funny. So then we have that final scene with him meeting up with Mare and Albedo. The only thing I would say in this scene is that there's a little comment that Ainz makes about giving Mare and Ring of Ainz Ooal, and they are reserved for guild members, and they made 100 of them. And there were 41 members of Ainz Ooal, and every member had a ring. And there's a passage of dialogue in the light novel where he says, like, okay, so that means there's 59 that are unassigned. No, wait, there's 58. So basically there is someone within Nazarick that was not a member of Ainz Ooal that has a ring of Ainz Ooal. So that it isn't explained who, but that was just a little point that I thought was neat that they pointed out in the light novel. So guys, that pretty much sums up this episode breakdown of Overlord, comparing it to the light novel. Like I said, out of all the episodes of Overlord, I would say this is one of the more accurate ones. Really, the only things that are excluded from this episode are just like small explanations about, certain things that happen for the most part, but there isn't anything very big that is missed in the anime. So overall, a pretty, accurate episode of Overlord, but there are things from the light novel that I think would be relevant to anyone who likes the Overlord anime, so I wanted to tell you. So guys, what did you think of this breakdown? Did you learn anything new? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see an episode 3 breakdown, please like the video to let me know, and if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know, and it'll let you know when I post in the future. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye!